Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to explain callbacks, promise, asynchronous await in JavaScript. So let us start. First of all, you must understand that JavaScript is always synchronous and single-threaded. There is no exact exception to it. JavaScript is basically always synchronous and single-threaded. But some people get confused that during the execution of network call or AJAX calls, JavaScript behaves in an asynchronous behavior or in an asynchronous way of execution. But it is just a way of understanding that during only the network calls and AJAX calls, JavaScript doesn't wait for the server response. Instead, it executes the upcoming steps or the next steps. So it gives an impression that JavaScript is asynchronously behaving, but in reality, JavaScript is synchronous and single-threaded. And also, in single-threaded execution, both asynchronous and synchronous execution are behaving in the same way. So let me just read this, that asynchronous versus synchronous execution, what they are. So we can, in a plain language, we can say that asynchronous execution is parallel handling of the events, where the process doesn't wait for an event to finish before starting for the next job in the queue or the next event. So for example, let us say if we have a function f1 which takes 1 second of time for executing, and then we have, let us say, another function which is invoking a network call, so which is taking basically 3 seconds of network transmission time, let us say server response time or network transmission time. And then we have a third function f3 which takes 2 seconds of time for execution. So in an asynchronous execution, what will happen is, if it is a single threaded execution, then f1 will execute, it will finish, and then f2 invocation will occur, and then because it is an asynchronous execution, it will not wait for it to complete, because once the request has gone to the server, it will not wait for it to complete. Instead, it will simply start executing the f3. But in an synchronous execution, which is also known as sequential handling of events, you can remember it in this way, that synchronous starts with S, and in the same way the sequential also starts with S. So synchronous execution is sequential handling of events. Here, process doesn't move forward or goes to a next process execution before completing the current process. So in this way, if f1, f2 and f3, the same sequence of executions are there, so it will wait for this to complete for the entire 3 seconds, and then it will go to the f3. But in the case of JavaScript, what happens is, though it is said to be synchronous, only in the case of AJAX or the network call, JavaScript doesn't wait for it to get completed. Instead, it moves forward. So we can say that just for the case of AJAX and network call, there is an exception in the JavaScript. I'll share this write-up with you in the description for my GitHub repository. Let us move to the example. This is my simple index.html. Very simple, nothing special here. It is just including a script file callbacks.js, which is currently empty. Yeah, empty. And just a second. Yeah. Okay. So this is basically empty. It is nothing. It is returning nothing to us. Let me write a small utility function here. So let us take an array of two objects. Apple is one of the attribute in the first object, and sorry, item is one of the attribute, and detail is another attribute, and these are all the values you can see here. So apple and having the detail, milk is having some details. This is basically a grocery items list. And here there is one print items function. So this function basically prints it. And just to simulate or present a similar situation of network delay or network response time, I have included a set timeout with a delay of 1 second. So here what is happening is it is printing the content of the items array with a delay of 1 second. It is a simple JavaScript. Uh, so let me run this. So I'm just refreshing the page. This is index.html in my Chrome browser. Okay, so we can see that with a delay of 1 second, it has printed the two items. Okay, so now let me write a small function for add item. So this will take one object as an input or parameter, and then again there is a set timeout. Okay, let me write it with the arrow function. And I am pushing the input item into the items array. So yeah, with a delay of let us say 2 seconds, and sorry, I'm calling this function item. So after apple and milk, let's take a cake. Detail is better. Vanilla cake. And then again, I am printing this. Okay. So yeah, let's check it. Save and then check. So here what is happening is the addition of the item, this third item, is going to take place after 2 seconds of delay. So by the time it has printed it, or the printing is happening with 1 second of delay, while the addition is happening with 2 seconds of delay. So at the time of printing, this item is not available in this items array. So that's why we are seeing here only 2 items. So this presents a similar situation of a network call. For example, if let us say you are raising a request to the server for some information or a JSON data, and by the time this JSON data is returned to you because of the network transmission delay or the server calculation, whatever. So because of that delay, and if you are processing that data in the in this in the client side or the UI front end side, then what will happen is that data hasn't reached you, and you have started processing it. This is exactly what is happening here, that the data has not been updated, but we are trying to print it. So now the question is that how we can solve such kind of issues. So the answer is using the callback, we can handle such kind of issues. So what is callback here? Callback is basically a concept where we define a function which will be called after the completion of the function. So let me just edit this add item function. So I'll write here a callback function. Let's call it my callback function. So please note that I have not included braces here. Okay, I just written the name of the function, and I'm calling this callback function after the item push. So here I'm calling this function. So now whenever I have to call the add item, what I'll do is I'll mention here a callback function that after the completion of the addition or sorry, after the completion of add item, which is the function I want to execute. So my intent or my expected behavior here is that as soon as my item is added to the items array, I want to print it, right? I want to print the all three items as soon as um, my input item has been included or pushed to the items array. So my callback function will be here print items. Okay, so when I am including this print items as a callback function, I no longer need this print items here, right? So now what will happen is this is a callback function. As soon as the add items is finished, after the 2 seconds, my callback function will be executed. So item is pushed, and then my callback function will be executed. So now I have saved this. Let us refresh it. So after a delay of 3 seconds, okay, these three items are printed. 2-second delay for this one, and 1 second delay is for printing the items. So this is the basics of callback function. Callback functions are basically a function which you want to execute after the completion of your parent function. Okay, clear? So this is callback function. Now let us move to the promises. Okay, before that, we need to understand the shortcomings of the callback functions, or we can say that when this callback function is solving our purpose of waiting for an appropriate amount of time and then executing the required function, then what is the need of promise and asynchronous await function, right? So there are some shortcomings in the callback function. Like developer has to take decision about where to place the callback function, right? This is shortcoming. Again, it is not an easy mechanism to handle failures. For example, if your items push or a function which is a key, which is doing the key job here, that function itself has failed, then what is the purpose of executing the callback function? Because the main function, or let us say the fetching of the information from the server, has been failed, and what is the point of printing the data fetched from the server? So in order to handle such kind of failures, developer must have to write his own failure handling logics, right? Similarly, callback function will still be executed in its sequential order even if few of the above steps have failed. Let us say that if few of the steps before the callback function has failed, still my callback function will be executed, right? So these are basically some of the shortcomings of the callback function. Since ES6, ES is basically the ECMA script, short form of ECMA script, and they are different. These are basically the standards set for the JavaScript, and it gets updated year by year. So if I'm right, currently ES10 is there since 2019, I guess. Yeah. So since ES6, which has come in 2015, we have this arrow function, and similarly these classes and inheritance things in Java. And the promises have also come after the ES6. So since 2015, we have this promises objects we can create. So let us see that what are these promises objects. Okay. So let us start with the promises object. Let me bring my copy code here in order to save some time. Okay. Again, a similar items array. I'm printing the item with a delay of 1 second. I am adding the item with a delay of 2 seconds. And here I am adding the item, and then printing it. This is my promises.js. Let us write here promises.js in my HTML. Okay, just for the sake of confirming, let us print. So we will see the two list. Fine, good enough. Now, in this add items, in this function add item, is there any way, like we have just seen that using the callbacks, we can handle the appropriate execution order of the functions. But is there any better way? So here comes the promise. So in the promise, you have to remember that in the promise, there are 5 keywords. Promise is just like how in the real world the promise happens. Like we promise for something with some person, right? We promise something, let us say, with one of the friend. If the promise is resolved, then whatever we have promised, we have to fulfill or will get fulfilled. In the same way, if promise is rejected, then we basically catch the person, we can say, like who has breached the trust or the violation of the trust or whatever. So in the same way, in this promise object, if let us say the promise is resolved, we execute whatever we want to execute in a dot then. Similarly, if promise is rejected, we execute whatever we want to, whatever steps we want to take in a catch, dot catch. And similarly, just like a try, catch, throw, and all those things which has come from the Java side, just like that, we have a finally here also. Like irrespective of promises resolved or rejected, we will write whatever steps we have to execute irrespective of resolve and reject in a finally block. Fine. So we have basically here 5 keywords: resolve, reject. Sorry, this is resolve only, not resolved. Resolve, reject, and corresponding to the resolve we have dot then, and corresponding to the reject we have dot catch, and then we have finally to execute anything which is irrespective of resolve or reject we want to execute. Okay, so in order to save time, let me just copy paste this. Okay, so this part I have copy pasted here. So instead of this add items, what I'm doing here is I have written my add items in this way. Okay, let us comment these 2 lines. Okay, so here what I'm doing is I'm creating a promise object with 2 parameters, resolve and reject inside it. This is basically a coding style called arrow function since ES6. Okay, so this is a function which is taking 2 parameters, resolve and reject, and with the timeout of 2 seconds delay, I am pushing the item into the items array, and I'm just storing one variable array. One boolean in a variable error, and based on the value of that error variable, I am setting that what my promise object will have to return, like whether it should be a resolve or it should be a reject. So let us say if my error is false, so my promise object will return resolve. Similarly, if my error is, let us say the value will be true, which we will set at a later step, then my promise object will be reject. Okay, so what will happen here is this add item is now going to return me a promise object. So now let us write here my add items. Okay, add item, and inside that I will just write quickly item. We have already written apple bread. Let us write here cake, and then detail. Okay, vanilla cake. Good. So once I have written this add item, so what I need to do is, because now add item is going to return me a promise object. So as we have already seen that based on resolve and reject, I will catch the result in dot then or dot catch respectively, right? So what I'll do is let us see here that my error is false, so it will return resolve. So let us catch it with then, and in the then I'm simply writing in arrow function format like my result, whatever result I get from the resolve, and I'm just printing into the console.log result. Okay, saved it, refresh. So what will happen here is it has printed success. Okay, it has printed success. So because it is returning here the resolve object, so that is why it has printed success. So let us say that now okay, so for printing it I can write it in this way, like after this console.log, let me write print items also, right? Print items, or okay, so it is not taking, okay, sorry, here also is semicolon, silly. Okay, I have to enclose them inside the curly braces because this is a function and not a single line function. Okay, so now this in the then block I'm writing a function which is taking care of what resolve is returning me, and based on that I'm printing the result, which is resolve result, and then print items. So let me refresh it, and we will see that the list of 3 items are printed and it is success. Exactly in the same way, let us say that we want to catch the, let me copy the same thing here. So exactly same thing, just replacing them to catch. So catch is for catching the reject. Okay, so now if I run, obviously my then will be printed. Okay, I have saved it, refreshing it. So based on then the success is printed. Now let us say that if my error is true, so it will return me the reject one, the sum issue. Then what will happen is, see, here some issue is returned. So here we can see that using the promise, resolve, reject, and corresponding to it, then and catch, we can handle the situation and execute our dependent events in a better way. Okay. So now let us say that we are receiving the promise object from different functions. Let us say there is one function for downloading some JSON from the server. There is another function for authenticating the user from the server, and so on. So if we will keep catching each of the promise object and then checking their values in .then and .catch multiple times for multiple promise objects, it will become a tedious, or it will make our code much like a redundant, doing redundant things. So in order to overcome this, there is a situation, sorry, there is a utility called promise.all. So here what happens is, let me just copy some of the things here. Yeah. Okay. Let me comment them. Okay, they are no more needed. So let us say I have a promise object in which I am returning a resolve, promise resolve. Promise to is basically some random value. It is a string. So as we know that JavaScript is a loosely typed language, and so it is not much of hard-coded type of object. like that all of the object types has to be matched. So in the promise 3, I'm just taking one randomly. Okay, and then in the promise dot all, I'll take the array of all this promise objects, and then I'm just checking that based on the values returned by all of them, it is just like an AND operator. I can say that it will do an AND operator, that all the promises are satisfied or not, because this is promise dot all. So basically all the promises are satisfied here or not. So based on that, yeah, sorry for a disturbance. Yeah, so because this is a promise dot all, so it will perform an AND operator for all these promises object, and then based on that object I'm catching here then. So let us see, because all the promises here are positives. Okay, so what will be my result here? So we can see that here all the three are returned, all the three promises objects are returned. Let us say that some of the promises objects are reject also. So promise dot reject, and here I'm just writing promise rejected. Okay, and in this case what will happen is, because I'm not catching the rejected, so let us see what happens. So you see promise rejected. So because we are not handling the rejected, the promise reject, it is showing it is an error, the red in the red font. So what is the best practices? We should always handle both uh, then sorry, both reject and resolve in their corresponding catch and then. Let me just copy same thing here. Okay, so now because these are AND operator performed by the promise dot all across this all the promises object. So okay, oh sorry, this is like catch. Catch. So you see this is promise rejected. Let us just test the finally also, finally, and again values console.log. This is finally. What will happen here is, you see, along with the promise rejected, this is finally also executed. So this is all about the promise, how it is handled, and how we execute the resolve and reject here. So we can see here that based on the timing Q1 and all, we are able to perform this add items in an appropriate way, just like what the callbacks are doing, in a much more organized way using these 5 keywords. Okay, but here again there are few shortcomings, that sometimes resolve, reject, then catch, finally are too much to remember and handle. So are there any simpler ways? Similarly, the responsibility is on the developer to categorize, resolve or reject, and then handle appropriately in dot then and dot catch is basically something which everyone has to handle while doing it. And a simple error could be could lead to a bug in your code. So to answer some of these shortcomings, we have this async await with us. So in this async await, what happens is, let me just copy my code here for saving some of our times. So okay, here again I have this items array. I am printing the items with a delay of 1 second. I'm adding here some of the some items with a delay of 2 seconds. I'm using promise here. So please remember that async await is also only available in JavaScript after ES6. So async await is using the promise object always. So it is dependent on the promises. So what happens with the async Okay, let us see. So here, this is an add item, so I have to print it after the add items. So print items. Okay. So up till here, oh sorry, I have to include here async item. Okay, sync await. Okay, so let us just confirm that up till here our, yeah. So these two are working so far. Okay, so right now we are not using any async or await anything. It is just a plain simple promise uh, object returning. That's it. So using the async await, what I can do is, let us write this print items in a simple function format. So I can write it in this way, right? This is my init function where I am adding some of the items. Oh, sorry, here I was not adding the items. That is why it was only 2. Okay. Sorry for that. Yeah. So here I'm having one init function in which I'm adding the item, this item, and then printing the item. So obviously, while I'm calling this, okay, what will happen is it will simply, print only 2 items. Why? Because there is a delay of 2 seconds. So using async and await, what happens is using the async keyword, I can declare my function, my JavaScript function as an asynchronous function. And once I have declared my JavaScript function as asynchronous, what I can do is I can define any of the statement, either one statement or an entire block as await. So that entire block or one statement will await, and then it will return me and promise, it will return a promise object to me, and then I can handle it appropriately. Let us see how it is done. So using the async keyword, I will define this function as asynchronous, and then if I write here await, so what will happen is this statement, till the time of this statement is executed, the execution will await here. It will wait for this execution to complete, and then after that the print items will be executed. So let us see now how it behaves. So far it was just printing 2 items. So now with the async and await, it will print 3 items, right? So this is how it works. In the same way, with the async and await, because this await is returning a promise object, so we can handle the resolve and reject also. Also, please notice that, resolve and reject, we can just name them anything. Just the order is important, like first will be resolve and the second will be reject. So we can name it anything we want. Okay. So just to finish it quickly, let me write it in this way. Instead of this async await, I'm writing it in this way. Okay, so here what I'm doing is in the await, which is an wait a second, better to comment it so that we can compare it. Okay, so instead of just handling this await promise object, I'm now handling both the resolve and reject. Okay, reject response, I can say here. Okay, so now what will happen is, if my based on the return, whether it is resolve or reject, that particular block, the then and dot catch will be executed. So right now it is resolved because this error is false, so this condition will be met. So let us see what happens here. So here this resolve will be printed, this success, right? If let us say if I'll put it true, just like the promise. So async await is nothing but a better way of handling the promises. That is all. Before concluding it, I will just present one other small situation here, which is about fetching the JSON from from the server. So here it is. Let us comment it so that the delay of 3 seconds will be saved. So here, this is just a dummy JSON returned from this URL. So this is my function fetch JSON, and this is my asynchronous function, and this is my await statement. So this statement will return me a promise object, and that promise object I am catching in this variable prom, and I am printing this. Okay, so no need of this block, just this. Okay, I'm printing this promise object here and this fetch JSON. So you can see that this promise object looks something like this. Okay, but if you will go inside somewhere, these are headers and these are basically all the HTTP headers and all. So somewhere we will find that the result of this one is there. Another way of fetching the result from this REST API JSON is something like this. This promise object which we have returned, let us change, let us let us convert that this from, we need basically to extract the JSON fetched from this URL using the .json function. And once that is done, let us print this data also, this JSON data. So console.log. Okay, data. So now what will happen is promise pending. Oh, okay. I need to provide here await also. Okay, so that so that this will return me a proper JSON. So please remember this format. And now we can see that this JSON is also returned. Okay, this JSON is the same JSON. We get it from this one. Okay, this is the same JSON. Fine. So this is all about the callbacks, promises, and await. Sorry, asynchronous await. You can find all these codes into the GitHub link shared in this video. Thank you. Thank you for watching up to here. If you like this video, please subscribe and like this video. Thank you.